I went to my friend's house that evening without really planning much ahead of time. It was one of those afternoons where I felt restless, wanting to be around someone familiar, and my friend had always been that comforting presence for me. When I reached her home and knocked, I half expected her to open the door with her usual smile, but instead, it was someone else. Her older brother stood there, surprised at first but then offering a small nod, stepping aside to let me in. I asked if she was home, already stepping inside out of habit, and he shook his head. "She went out a little while ago," he said, almost casually, though his eyes lingered on me for a moment longer than I expected. I thought about turning back, maybe waiting until later, but he suggested I stay until she returned. The living room was warm, with faint music playing from somewhere in the background, and I felt a strange, quiet settle between us as I sat down. We weren't strangers exactly. He had always been around whenever I visited, polite but reserved. Still, sitting across from him without my friend there felt different, like the air itself had changed. He asked me how I was doing, about school, about my family, and though the questions were ordinary, his voice carried a softness I wasn't used to hearing from him. I found myself answering more openly than I expected, talking about little frustrations and things I usually only shared with close friends. The conversation drifted in unexpected directions. He spoke about his work, how exhausting it was, how he sometimes felt unseen in his own home. I listened, nodding, feeling the sincerity in his tone. There was something vulnerable about the way he talked, as if he had been holding these words back for a long time. The more he spoke, the more I found myself forgetting why I had come there in the first place. Time passed quickly, and the silence between our sentences grew heavier, not uncomfortable, but charged with something I couldn't name. His eyes lingered on me again, and this time I noticed. My heart beat a little faster, though I tried to ignore it. I reminded myself that I was there for my friend, not for him, and yet there was something magnetic in the way his presence filled the room. At one point, he got up to pour some water, and when he handed me the glass, our fingers brushed lightly. It was such a small thing, but it startled me. I pulled my hand back quickly, though my skin seemed to remember the warmth of that brief touch. He smiled, not in a mocking way, but almost as though he, too, had felt the moment pass between us. I tried to shift the conversation back to safe topics, asking about his plans for the week, but my voice felt less steady now. Every word, every glance seemed to carry a weight I wasn't prepared for. I kept telling myself that this was nothing, just an ordinary visit, yet somewhere deep down I knew I was standing on the edge of something that could change everything. When the rain started outside, tapping softly against the windows, he got up to close them. I watched him for a moment longer than I should have, noticing the way his shoulders moved, the way his presence filled the quiet space. When he turned back, our eyes met, and neither of us looked away immediately. Something unspoken passed between us in that silence, something I couldn't admit but also couldn't deny. The room felt smaller after that, the distance between us shrinking even though we had moved. My breath quickened, and I told myself to stay calm, to remember why I had come. But my friend wasn't home, and the person in front of me wasn't just a familiar face anymore. He was someone who suddenly seemed closer, someone I wasn't supposed to notice in this way, and yet I couldn't stop myself. I sipped the water slowly, avoiding his eyes, but I could feel his gaze still on me. I tried to steady my thoughts, reminding myself that this was just an ordinary visit, nothing more. And yet, deep inside, I already knew the evening was leading somewhere I hadn't expected. The rain outside grew heavier, its rhythm filling the spaces between our words. I sat there, listening to it, pretending to be absorbed in the sound, but in truth, my thoughts were everywhere. I kept asking myself why I hadn't just left when I found out my friend wasn't home. It would have been so simple: say goodbye politely, step back out into the evening, and wait for another time. But I hadn't. Instead, I stayed, and now every minute seemed to pull me deeper into something I couldn't quite name. He walked back to the sofa and sat down across from me, but this time a little closer than before. Not close enough to seem obvious, but close enough that I felt the shift. His arm rested on the side of the couch, casual, as though he didn't notice the space between us narrowing. I tried to focus on the sound of the rain, but it was impossible to ignore the warmth of his presence. We spoke again, and this time his words came slower, more thoughtful. He asked about my dreams, about what I wanted for myself in the future. No one ever asked me questions like that, not even my closest friends. I found myself answering honestly, my voice softer, my heart lighter, as though he had unlocked something I had kept hidden even for myself. He listened, really listened, his eyes fixed on me as though my words mattered more than anything else in the world. The more we talked, the more I felt the weight of his attention. It wasn't just polite interest, it was something else, something sharper, deeper. Every nod, every glance, every pause between his words drew me in. I should have been cautious. I should have reminded myself of the boundaries that existed, but the truth was I didn't want to. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen in a way I hadn't expected, and it was disarming. At one point, he leaned forward slightly, his hand brushing against mine on the cushion between us. It was accidental. At least it seemed so, but the moment lingered longer than it should have. Neither of us pulled away immediately. His hand was warm, steady, and I could feel the unspoken tension building in that tiny touch. My heart raced, my breath caught, and for a second I forgot where I was. Then, almost reluctantly, I moved my hand back, but the memory of his touch stayed with me. Silence stretched between us, not empty, but filled with everything we weren't saying. I shifted in my seat, unsure of what to do, my mind torn between the right thing and the thing my heart seemed to want. He must have sensed my unease, because his voice softened even more. "You don't have to be nervous," he said, and though his words were simple, the way he said them made me feel exposed. I forced a smile, telling him I wasn't nervous, but we both knew it wasn't true. My pulse betrayed me, quick and uneven, my gaze darting away every time our eyes met. The rain outside became louder, almost as if it were echoing the storm inside me. I clasped my hands together tightly, as if that small gesture could anchor me. Then he leaned back, his expression thoughtful, as though he was searching for the right words. "You know," he said quietly, "sometimes people find themselves in places they never expected. And sometimes those moments change everything." His voice lingered in the air, heavy with meaning, and I swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. I told myself to stand up, to end this before it went further, but my body didn't move. Instead, I stayed rooted to the couch, caught between fear and fascination. I wanted to believe I could walk away, but the truth was, I wasn't sure I wanted to anymore. The seconds stretched, and then he reached out again, slower this time, deliberate. His fingers brushed mine gently, as though asking permission without words. I didn't pull away. My breath trembled, my chest rising and falling too quickly, but I didn't stop him. That simple contact felt like the crossing of a line, one I knew could never be uncrossed, yet in that moment, I couldn't bring myself to care. My eyes lifted to his, and what I saw there both terrified and comforted me. It wasn't just desire, it was loneliness, longing, something raw and unguarded. That look undid me. I felt my defenses slipping, my resolve weakening. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered warnings, reminding me of what was at stake, of the trust one would be breaking. But another voice, quieter yet stronger, urged me forward, telling me to follow the pull I couldn't resist. I sat there, trembling inside, as the world outside blurred into the sound of rain and the soft hum of silence. Something irreversible had begun, though no words were spoken, and I knew that whatever happened next, nothing would ever be the same again. The air between us was no longer the same. That small, simple touch had changed everything, and now I felt as though we were standing on the edge of a cliff, both of us unsure whether to step back or to leap. I could hear the rain outside, steady and relentless, but inside the room it felt quieter, heavier, as though the world itself was holding its breath. I told myself I should move away, create distance, break the silence that was pressing down on us. But instead, I stayed frozen, caught between reason and feeling. His hand lingered close to mine, not demanding, not forcing, but waiting. I could sense the hesitation in him too, the same battle raging behind his calm expression. And yet, there was something inevitable about it, something that made resistance feel almost impossible. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and careful. "I shouldn't say this," he admitted, "but I can't stop thinking about you." The words hit me harder than I expected. I felt my chest tighten, my throat go dry. 100 responses swirled in my head, but none of them came out. I only stared, caught off guard, trembling with emotions I couldn't even name. I whispered his name softly, as if saying it could anchor me, remind me of where I was and what I was doing. But it only seemed to draw us closer. He leaned in slightly, not enough to close the distance, but enough that I felt the weight of his presence pressing against me. My heart beat so loudly, I was sure he could hear it. The guilt rose inside me like a tide, reminding me of my friend, of the boundaries I was about to break. But alongside that guilt came something else, a desperate curiosity, a longing I hadn't expected. I tried to remind myself of loyalty, of trust, of the risks, but my body betrayed me. I didn't move away. I didn't tell him to stop. His words tumbled out again, quieter this time. "I've been so lonely, and with you here it feels different. It feels like I can breathe again." There was no pretense in his tone, no arrogance, only honesty. That truth disarmed me. It was dangerous, but it was also real, and it pulled me closer when I should have been running. I felt the warmth of his hand again, this time more certain, resting gently over mine. I closed my eyes for a moment, fighting the storm inside me, but when I opened them, he was still there, waiting. There was no turning back now. Something in me gave in, something fragile and reckless, and I let myself fall into the moment. The closeness between us grew, slow and unspoken. He didn't rush, didn't push, only stayed near enough for me to feel the gravity of his presence. Every second stretched endlessly, my pulse racing faster than I thought possible. I kept telling myself this was wrong, that it would lead to nothing but regret, but my heart was louder than my conscience. I don't know how much time passed like that, sitting there in silence, hands brushing, breaths mingling, hearts pounding. It felt like the room had collapsed into just the two of us, as if the rest of the world no longer existed. The rain outside blurred into a distant hum. The ticking of the clock faded away. All that remained was the fragile, dangerous thread pulling us together. When he finally leaned closer, his eyes searching mine, I felt the world tilt beneath me. Every instinct screamed to stop, but I didn't. Instead, I let the moment swallow me whole, because deep inside, I wanted it too badly to resist. The line between right and wrong blurred until it was nothing more than a shadow. When we finally pulled back, breathless and shaken, the silence that followed was deafening. I couldn't look at him right away, my heart pounding, my thoughts a blur. My hands trembled in my lap, guilt and exhilaration crashing into me all at once. He sat back, running a hand through his hair, his expression conflicted but unregretful. Neither of us spoke immediately. What could we say? We had crossed something we could never uncross, and no words could undo it. I wanted to tell myself it was just a moment, nothing more, but deep inside I knew it wasn't. It was a choice, a turning point, and the weight of it pressed down on me with every breath I took. Finally, he broke the silence. "I'm sorry," he whispered, though his voice carried more longing than regret. I shook my head quickly, unable to bear the sound of apology, because it would only make the guilt heavier. My throat ached, my eyes stung, but I couldn't find the strength to answer. I stood up, needing space, needing to breathe. My legs felt unsteady, my heart still racing as though it hadn't caught up with what had just happened. I walked to the window, staring out at the rain, though I couldn't see anything clearly. Behind me, I felt his gaze still on me, heavy and consuming. In that moment, I knew nothing between us could ever be the same again. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but one truth burned inside me. I had already stepped into a secret I could never confess, a betrayal I could never take back. The room felt unbearably heavy after that. I stayed by the window, my hand resting against the cool glass, trying to calm the storm inside me. Outside, the rain had softened to a drizzle, the sound gentler now, but inside my chest the chaos only grew louder. I kept asking myself how I could let this happen, how I could sit there and allow lines to blur in ways I had always promised myself they never would. I turned slightly, just enough to glance back at him. He was sitting on the edge of the sofa, elbows resting on his knees, staring at the floor as though he too was lost in the weight of what had just unfolded. There was no arrogance in his posture, no satisfaction, only the same tangled confusion I felt. It made me realize how dangerous it was, how both of us had stepped into something neither of us had planned. When he finally looked up, our eyes met, and I felt that same pull again, the one I had been trying to fight since the moment I stepped inside the house. But this time, I forced myself to look away quickly, reminding myself of what was at stake. My friend's trust, the life I had outside of this house, the image of who I thought I was. All of it suddenly seemed fragile, hanging by a thread. "I don't know what to say," he admitted quietly. His voice was low, almost apologetic. "I never meant for this to happen, but I can't pretend I don't feel it." Those words broke something inside me. Part of me wanted to collapse into them, to let myself believe there was something real in the connection we had just crossed into. But another part of me screamed that it didn't matter how real it felt, it was wrong. It was betrayal, pure and simple, no matter how gently we tried to justify it. I shook my head, my voice barely steady. "We shouldn't have, it was a mistake." The words burned in my throat, because even as I said them, a part of me didn't believe them. I could still feel the warmth of his hand, the weight of his closeness, the unspoken truth that I had wanted it as much as he had. He didn't argue, didn't try to change my mind. He only nodded slowly, as though he understood, though his eyes betrayed the ache of something deeper. The silence that followed was suffocating. I wanted to run, to escape the house and never look back, but my legs felt too heavy to move. Minutes passed like hours. I sat back down, this time across from him again, but I kept my distance. We spoke only in fragments, about nothing that mattered, both of us pretending to anchor ourselves in normality, though the storm lingered between us. Every glance carried weight, every pause a reminder of the secret we now shared. Eventually, the sound of the front door opening startled us both. My friend's voice called out from the hallway, cheerful and unaware, and I felt my stomach drop. Panic surged through me, though outwardly, I tried to remain composed. He sat straighter, his expression shifting quickly back to something neutral, as though nothing unusual had happened at all. When she walked into the room, smiling at me with genuine warmth, my guilt nearly crushed me. I forced a smile in return, hiding the storm behind my eyes, praying she wouldn't notice the tremor in my hands or the way my voice cracked when I greeted her. She glanced at her brother, then back at me, completely oblivious to the tension that lingered in the air. The evening carried on as though nothing had happened. We talked, laughed, made plans for the weekend. On the surface, everything was normal, but beneath it all, I carried the weight of what I couldn't say. Every time my friend looked at me with trust in her eyes, I felt a sharp twist of guilt in my chest. Every time her brother's gaze flickered briefly toward me, I remembered the secret we now carried, locked tightly between us. When it was finally time to leave, I stepped outside into the damp night air, breathing deeply as though I had been holding my breath the entire time. The cool air hit my skin, and for a moment I thought I might cry. I didn't look back at the house. I couldn't. My footsteps were hurried, my heart racing, each step heavy with the weight of the betrayal I had just committed. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling in the darkness, unable to sleep. My mind replayed every moment, every glance, every word. Guilt gnawed at me, sharp and merciless, but beneath it lingered something more dangerous: desire. The memory of how it felt to be seen, to be wanted, wouldn't leave me. It haunted me, pulling me back into the very thing I was trying to escape. I told myself it had to end there, that it could never happen again. And yet, a part of me knew the truth. Once a line like that is crossed, it can never truly disappear. It lingers in the silence, in the stolen glances, in the spaces between words. It becomes a shadow you carry with you, a secret that no one else can ever know. And so I closed my eyes, torn between guilt and longing, knowing that tomorrow I would face them both again. Knowing that nothing, no matter how hard I tried, would ever be the same.